As the sun began to set over the tranquil forest, a man named David stumbled upon a heart-wrenching sight. A bear, tears streaming down its furry face, stood before him, pleading for help. David's heart skipped a beat as he tried to comprehend the reason behind the bear's sorrowful cries. It wasn't unusual for David to come across a bear in the wild. He had hiked through enough forests to know they were almost unavoidable, at least on the trails he hiked. But there was something about this bear that stood out to him instantly. It didn't show anger or aggression, but it didn't run away either. It even almost looked like the bear was crying. David's first instinct was to make himself bigger and yell loudly in the hope of scaring away the bear. But he quickly realized that wasn't working at all. Slowly, the bear even began to walk his way. Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. David, unsure of what to do, froze. He knew running away was a bad idea, so he just waited for the bear's next move. The bear moved carefully and calculated, not like it wanted to do David any harm. It was a very strange situation, even for David. Sure, he had come across dangerous situations during his hikes, but nothing compared to what was happening now. He stood there, frozen, as the bear carefully sniffed his jeans, his shoes, and even his hands. David knew that with one sudden bite, his fingers could be gone. His heart raced as the bear slowly stepped backward and stood up on his back feet. The bear growled, but not loud enough to scare David away. It was a low, quiet growl, as if the bear wanted to get David's attention. David knew there was something about this bear that didn't sit right. Then it suddenly dawned on him. The bear was asking for help. Not knowing how to tell the bear he was there to help, David began to try something. He slowly and carefully stepped in the bear's direction, reaching out his hands. He thought maybe by doing exactly what the bear did with him, sniffing everything, he would let the bear know he was on its side. And to his surprise, it actually worked. The bear let David come very close, and when he was done pretending to sniff everything, the bear got down on all fours again and began to walk away. David sighed. Was that all the bear wanted from him? Well, clearly not, because after taking a few steps, the bear looked behind and noticed David wasn't following him. So it growled loudly, telling David to follow. David was now 100% sure the bear wanted him to follow it. So David obeyed. He began to walk toward the bear, and as soon as the bear noticed David was coming its way, it began to walk as well. As they hiked down the trail, David's mind raced with thoughts. What if the bear was tricking him, and they were actually on their way to David's death? There were so many what-ifs that David began to get dizzy. He quickly realized thinking of all those doom scenarios wasn't good for him, and only gave him more anxiety. He had to trust his judgment, and even had to trust this wild bear's judgment that he was safe and that he wasn't going to be eaten alive. The bear led him down the trail he had already planned to hike, up until almost 30 minutes had passed. Then, the bear suddenly went off trail and David stopped for a second. How could he ever find his way back to the trail after helping the bear out? He couldn't risk getting lost in the forest, but the bear grew impatient. It growled louder this time when it noticed David had stopped again. It even showed its teeth. David knew he had no time to figure out a way back. He just had to hope his experience would guide him. So he began to walk again, closely following the bear. He tried his best to memorize everything that stood out to him. A strange-looking rock, moss on a tree, and even a broken tree branch. David began to hear the rushing sound of a nearby river as they walked. He instantly knew where he was, and it wasn't a positive feeling. They were deep into the heart of the forest, with no hiking trail nearby. The sound of rushing water intensified with every step, and David feared the bear would want to cross the river. When they arrived at the river, David saw how fast the water was rushing down. There was no way they could cross over without being swept away by the current, but he knew the bear knew that too, so why bring him here? He carefully looked around, searching for a cub in need, but there was none. Suddenly, the bear began to pace around the riverbank. David realized the bear actually did want him to cross over to the other side, but probably realized that wasn't possible anymore. There had been a lot of rainfall the day before, which could be the reason for the excessive amount of water in the river. The bear had possibly crossed the river before the water had gotten so high. Suddenly, David heard a sound coming from the other side of the river. He instantly felt like they were very close to whatever the bear needed help with, but how on earth could he cross such a dangerous river? He heard the sound again but was confused over what it could be. It didn't sound like a bear cub at all. The bear was still nervously pacing around the riverbank. It growled now and again and even placed a paw inside the water to cross over, but then quickly changed its mind, realizing it would never make it. David looked around him and noticed something hovering over the river a few meters down. He quickly walked toward it, hoping the bear wouldn't think he was running away. David approached what appeared to be a makeshift bridge, a precarious arrangement of fallen trees and vines spanning the rushing river. He hesitated, aware of the risk, but the bear's anxious pacing and occasional glances urged him on. With a deep breath, David stepped onto the bridge. Each movement was deliberate, his eyes fixed on the structure beneath him, testing its strength. Behind him, the bear watched, its breaths visible in the cool air. As David inched across the bridge, every creak of the wood and shift of the vines sent a jolt of fear through him. He tried not to look at the churning water below, focusing instead on the stable ground ahead. His hands gripped the vines tightly, the rough texture biting into his skin. Each step was a testament to his determination to help the bear, to understand the urgency behind its actions. From the riverbank, the bear eyed the bridge and David's slow progress. It seemed to understand the risk David was taking and hesitated, torn between its instinctive fear of the unstable bridge and the need for help. Finally, with a tentative step, the bear placed a paw on the bridge. The structure swayed slightly under its weight, but held. Encouraged, the bear slowly followed David, its eyes fixed on him as a source of trust. Reaching the other side, David let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He turned back to see the bear making its final steps onto solid ground. The relief in the bear's eyes was palpable, mirroring David's own. For a moment, they just stood there, man and bear, on the edge of the unknown, bound by a shared ordeal. David's heart pounded not just from the crossing, but from the realization of the journey ahead. The bear, now on the same side as David, shook itself, as if shedding the fear of the crossing. David watched in awe as the bear then turned, giving him a look that seemed almost grateful. There was a sense of understanding, a silent agreement that they were in this together. David followed as the bear led the way deeper into the forest, stepping into a world far from the trails he knew, guided by an unlikely companion. Following the bear, David ventured deeper into the forest. The terrain grew increasingly rough, with dense underbrush and uneven ground. He noticed the bear navigated the landscape with an ease that contrasted sharply with his own cautious steps. The forest around them seemed ancient, untouched by civilization. David's sense of adventure was tinged with a growing unease, realizing he was venturing into a part of the wilderness few had seen. As the forest closed in around them, the sense of isolation deepened. David's mind was a whirlwind of curiosity and apprehension. He listened to the distant calls of unknown animals and the rustling of leaves, each sound a reminder of his vulnerability in this wild place. Despite his experience as a hiker, this journey with the bear felt like uncharted territory, both physically and emotionally. Their journey was marked by the raw, untamed nature of the forest. Fallen trees blocked their path and thick vines hung like curtains. David saw footprints of various animals and marks on trees that told stories of the forest's inhabitants. It was a world far removed from the manicured trails and guideposts he was used to, a world where nature reigned supreme. David realized he was entirely at the mercy of the bear's guidance. Each step was a leap of faith, trusting in the instincts of a wild animal. He reflected on the surreal nature of his situation, following a bear through an unknown forest. It was a situation that defied logic, Yet here he was, stepping into the unknown, led by a creature that was both a guide and a mystery. The bear led with a purpose that was evident in its confident strides. It seemed to know exactly where it was going, navigating the terrain with a familiarity that only a creature of the forest could possess. David marveled at the bear's intuition and connection to the land. He followed closely, a silent observer in the bear's world, curious about their destination and the reason behind this extraordinary journey. As dusk fell, the forest transformed. Shadows lengthened, and the dense canopy above blotted out the last vestiges of sunlight. David and the bear moved through an increasingly darkened world, the forest around them growing thicker and more foreboding. David's senses heightened, acutely aware of every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig. The bear seemed undisturbed, its large form moving confidently through the twilight forest. The nocturnal symphony of the forest began to swell around them. Mysterious calls and whispers echoed through the trees, the sources unseen but ever present. David tried to identify the sounds, but many were unfamiliar to him. Adding to the tension of their journey, the forest felt alive, a hidden world awakening as humanity retreated. David's reliance on the bear for guidance became ever more pronounced in this alien, moonlit world. The weight of solitude pressed heavily on David as he realized how far they had ventured from any known path. Surrounded by the untamed wilderness, he felt a stark disconnect from his usual life. The realization of being entirely alone, save for the bear, in such a vast, wild space was both exhilarating and intimidating. He was a visitor here, in a world that followed ancient rhythms and rules unknown to him. Under the soft glow of the moon, David kept a vigilant watch. The forest around them was a labyrinth of silvery shadows and faint light. He scanned the surroundings, alert to any movement or threat. The bear, seemingly attuned to David's restlessness, stayed close, its large form a comforting presence in the darkness. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the wildness enveloping them. Throughout the night, the bear remained a steady companion. Its presence was both reassuring and enigmatic, a guardian of sorts in the vast wilderness. David watched as it occasionally lifted its nose, sniffing the air, or turned its ears towards distant sounds. In these moments, the bear seemed to be listening to a language David couldn't understand, a dialogue between the animal and the ancient forest that was its home. Echoes of the pastor's dawn broke. David stumbled upon a faded and torn piece of paper caught in the underbrush. It was a fragment of a circus poster, vibrant colours dulled by time and elements, featuring the image of a dancing bear. The incongruity of finding such an item in the midst of the wilderness sent a chill down his spine. It was a stark reminder of humanity's reach, a whisper of a forgotten past in the heart of the forest. Continuing their journey, David noticed unusual footprints in the soft earth, distinct from the typical tracks of forest animals. These prints were larger, with patterns he couldn't identify. The realization that they were following a path frequented by unknown creatures added an edge to his apprehension. The bear, unfazed, followed the trail with a purpose, as if recognizing the signs left by these mysterious travelers. Further along the path, David came across more signs of human activity. A length of frayed rope hung from a tree branch, and nearby lay a few scattered, rusted items that once might have been part of a tool or equipment. These remnants, seemingly abandoned and reclaimed by nature, hinted at a human presence that was both out of place and long gone, adding layers to the mystery surrounding their trek. Every new discovery seemed to deepen the mystery surrounding their journey. David found himself piecing together clues, trying to form a coherent picture from these disparate elements. The torn circus poster, the strange footprints, the abandoned items, all these suggested a story hidden within the depths of the forest. With each step, David's curiosity grew, his mind racing with questions about what these clues signified and how they connected to the bear's urgent plea for help. As they ventured deeper, the items they encountered suggested a narrative long lost to time. David imagined a caravan of performers and animals, a traveling circus that somehow met its end in this remote place. The thought of what might have transpired to leave such traces in this wild setting was both fascinating and unsettling. With each clue, the bear's urgency and the purpose of their journey seemed to grow clearer, yet remained shrouded in mystery. David emerged from the dense forest into a clearing that took his breath away. Before him lay the remnants of an abandoned circus. The big top, once a symbol of joy and wonder, was now tattered and fading, its stripes bleached by the elements. Rusting carnival rides and concession stands dotted the landscape, creating a ghostly scene. It was as if he had stepped into a forgotten memory, a relic of joy now surrendered to the wilderness. As he moved closer, David's eyes were drawn to a series of cages. Inside, he saw animals, some pacing restlessly, others lying still, resigned. Their eyes told stories of neglect and longing. The sight of these creatures, so out of place in this desolate tableau, struck a chord in David's heart. The reality of their plight, trapped and abandoned in this forsaken circus, was a stark reminder of the cruelty they had endured. The abandoned circus was a place of contrasting emotions. Faded posters and remnants of colourful decorations hinted at a time of laughter and applause, now replaced by an overwhelming silence and sadness. It was as if the joy once shared here had been abruptly silenced, leaving behind only the echoes of its existence. David felt a deep sense of melancholy as he walked among the relics as they wandered through the circus grounds. David noticed the bear's behaviour change. It moved with a sense of familiarity, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed at old scents. The bear paused frequently, gazing at the cages and then at David, as if urging him to understand. It was clear that this place held significance for the bear, a connection to a past life that was both sorrowful and profound. Standing amidst the ruins, David felt a sense of profound loss. This circus, once a place of wonder, had been reclaimed by nature and forgotten by the world. Vines crept up the sides of the tents, and trees had begun to grow through the abandoned structures. It was a scene of decay and neglect, a hidden corner of the world where the memories of laughter and cheers had faded into a haunting, silent desolation. The grim reality of the scene before him left David feeling overwhelmed. The animals, clearly mistreated and neglected, stirred a deep sense of sorrow and anger within him. He moved from cage to cage, observing the creatures who looked back with a mix of fear and hopelessness. The air was heavy with a sense of despair. David's heart ached as he realized the extent of the suffering that had taken place in this forgotten corner of the world. As David observed the bear's behavior, it became evident that the bear had a history with this place. It moved among the cages with a familiarity that spoke of a past life spent here. The bear paused at certain spots, sniffing and letting out soft sounds, as if reminiscing or searching for something lost. David watched, a realization dawning on him that this bear had once been part of this circus, perhaps a star performer now reduced to a mere ghost of its past. David felt a profound heartache as he pieced together the bear's past and the plight of the animals around him. It was a story of abandonment and despair, a once thriving circus that had left its performers, both human and animal, behind. The contrast between the bear's current state of freedom and its past life of captivity was stark and saddening. David felt a surge of empathy for these creatures who had been left to languish in the ruins. Amidst the ruins of the circus, David reflected on the stark contrast between the surrounding forest's natural beauty and the grim reality of the man-made structures. The forest was a place of life and growth, whereas the circus was a site of neglect and decay. The juxtaposition was jarring, a reminder of the consequences of human actions on the natural world. It was a poignant moment of reflection for David, standing in the midst of what used to be a place of joy. Moved by the suffering he witnessed, David knew he couldn't just walk away. He had to take action. He began to think of ways to help these animals, to bring them out of this place of despair. David checked his phone for any signal, hoping to contact animal rescue services or anyone who could help. It was a race against time, and David was determined to do everything in his power to change the fate of these forgotten animals. In a frantic attempt, David pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed for help. The signal was weak, barely a flicker of connectivity in this remote part of the forest. He paced around the clearing, holding the phone high, desperate for just enough signal to make the call. Finally, a faint connection was established, and David quickly conveyed the urgency of the situation, his voice a mix of desperation and determination. David's voice was steady but urgent as he described the location and the dire circumstances of the abandoned circus and its captive animals. He provided as many details as he could, knowing that every piece of information was crucial for a successful rescue. As he spoke, he glanced at the bear and the other animals, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear and hope. David knew that their lives might depend on this single, desperate message. As David ended the call, the phone signal flickered and died, leaving him in silence once again. He stared at the screen, hoping against hope that his message had been clear enough, that help would come. The reality of their isolation set in, and with it, a feeling of fading hope. He looked up at the sky, now darkening into night, and knew that the coming hours would be crucial. David prepared to spend the night near the cages, understanding the necessity of keeping watch over the animals. He found some comfort in the bear's calm presence, a silent ally in the midst of uncertainty. He gathered some branches to make a makeshift shelter, his mind racing with thoughts of the rescue team, their arrival time, and the logistics of transporting the animals. Despite his exhaustion, he knew he couldn't rest, not while the animals' fates hung in the balance. Settling in for the night, David's sense of responsibility weighed heavily on him. The sounds of the forest at night were a constant backdrop, but his focus remained on the animals. He checked on them periodically, offering words of comfort, though he knew they couldn't understand him. The bear stayed close, a shared vigil in the darkness. David's thoughts were a mix of worry and determination, a guardian standing watch in the dark, awaiting the dawn and the hope it would bring. Throughout the night, David kept a vigilant watch under the cover of shadows. His eyes darted between the cages and the dark forest around them, alert to any sound or movement. Despite his exhaustion, his mind was a whirlwind of concern for the animals and hope for their rescue. The moon cast a pale light over the scene, turning the abandoned circus into a landscape of silver and shadow, a surreal backdrop to his guardianship. The nocturnal chorus of the forest mingled with the restless sounds of the caged animals. The occasional soft growl of the bear, the rustling of feathers, and the pacing of paws created a haunting melody that echoed through the clearing. David could feel the distress of the animals, their anxiety palpable in the cool night air. It was a reminder of the urgency of their situation, heightening his resolve to ensure their safety until help arrived. In the quiet moments of the night, David reflected on the bear's incredible journey and his unexpected role in it. He wondered about the series of events that had led the bear to seek his help and marveled at the trust the animal had placed in him. The responsibility of being their protector in this critical hour weighed on him, yet he felt a profound connection to the bear and its plight, a bond forged by circumstance and empathy. As the night deepened, David found himself longing for the first light of dawn. Each hour that passed was a step closer to the rescue he hoped was coming. He imagined the sound of vehicles approaching, the voices of rescuers, the beginning of the animals' liberation. The anticipation was tinged with anxiety, a fear that help might not arrive in time. Yet the promise of dawn kept his spirits buoyed, a beacon of hope in the enveloping darkness. Throughout the night, the bear remained close to David, a silent, watchful presence. There was an unspoken bond between them, a mutual understanding forged through shared experience. The bear's occasional glances and soft sounds felt like communication, a recognition of their partnership in this vigil. David felt a sense of camaraderie with the bear, a connection that transcended the barriers between human and animal, united by a common goal to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, David heard the distant sound of vehicles approaching, His heart leaped with hope. Soon, a convoy of rescue vehicles emerged, led by wildlife conservationists and law enforcement. Relief washed over David as he greeted the team. They quickly assessed the situation, their expressions a mix of shock and determination. For David, the arrival of the rescue team was a much-awaited promise of salvation for the animals. As the rescue operation commenced, the team unearthed the dark past of the abandoned circus. Old records found on site revealed its illegal operations, including the poaching and illicit trade of exotic animals. The bear, David explained, had led him here, uncovering a secret that had long been hidden in the depths of the forest. The sordid history of the circus, now exposed, painted a grim picture of exploitation and cruelty that had gone unnoticed for years. David actively participated in the rescue operation, helping to calm the animals as they were being freed. He assisted the team in unlocking cages and providing immediate care. Each animal, from the bear to the smallest monkey, was carefully examined and treated. David's heart swelled with a mix of sadness and relief as each animal was liberated, their first steps of freedom a poignant moment of triumph over their tragic past. The discovery of the abandoned circus and the subsequent rescue operation quickly garnered media attention. Journalists and news crews arrived, documenting the dramatic unfolding of events. Interviews with David and the rescue team highlighted the plight of the animals and the illegal activities of the circus. The story spread rapidly, shining a spotlight on wildlife rights and the dark underbelly of animal exploitation. It became a talking point, stirring public emotion and debate on the issue. In the wake of the rescue, investigations into the circus's operations sparked a broader conversation about animal welfare and conservation. The story of the forgotten circus and its animal victims brought to light the need for stricter wildlife protection laws and ethical treatment of animals in captivity. The bear, once a performer in this tragic show, became a symbol of resilience and hope. The legacy of the lost circus evolved into a catalyst for change, inspiring action and awareness in the fight for animal rights. Following the rescue, David found a new purpose in becoming an advocate for animal rights. He spoke at public forums, participated in wildlife conservation events, and collaborated with animal welfare organizations. His experience with the bear and the abandoned circus had transformed him into a passionate voice for those who could not speak for themselves. David's advocacy brought attention to the often overlooked plight of captive and mistreated animals, making him a respected figure in the animal rights community. David began sharing his incredible story widely. He gave interviews, wrote articles, and even started a blog detailing his journey from an unsuspecting hiker to an animal rights advocate. His tale of the bear's guidance and the subsequent rescue of the circus animals captivated audiences, raising awareness about wildlife conservation and the cruelty of animal captivity. His story inspired others to take action, spreading a message of empathy and responsibility towards all living creatures. In quieter moments, David reflected on the profound impact of his adventure. The experience had reshaped his understanding of the natural world and his place within it. He thought about the bear, the bond they had formed, and how it had altered the course of his life. This journey had not only saved the lives of the animals, but had also awakened in him a deeper appreciation for nature and its inhabitants. It was a transformative realization that would stay with him forever. David continued to visit the forest, the place where his life had taken an unexpected turn. These visits were a reminder of his commitment to protecting wildlife and preserving their habitats. He often walked the trails, hoping to catch a glimpse of the bear, now a free resident of the forest. Each visit reinforced his resolve to be a guardian for nature, ensuring that the beauty and sanctity of the wild were respected and preserved. To David, the bear had become a symbol of hope and change. It represented the strength and resilience of nature and its ability to inspire human action. Although he didn't see the bear on every visit, its legacy lived on in his work and advocacy. The bear had unknowingly set David on a path of guardianship and activism, a journey that continued to unfold with each step he took, towards protecting and honoring the natural world around him.